The Peace Corps.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in that, and how did you get to Ukraine? Like, were there other options? Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. So I think I had first gotten interested in it in high school. Um, you know, we went to the same high school, and Peace Corps is. How long did you go to Canisius? 2 years, right?
2 years. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Um, but even Joe's and maybe Ridley, I don't know, and other schools sort of like that, service trips are kind of a common thing, and so
Right.
it kind of fit into the theme of like high school, and so I became aware of it in high school, and yeah, so come the end of college, trying to figure out what to do next, and considered it, ended up going to law school. Ended up not finishing my first semester there for a variety of reasons, and then returned to looking to go into the Peace Corps because the application lead times are kind of long. So like I left law school in November 2017, and like they were already taking applications for like August and the end of summer the next year. So
Gotcha.
anyway, so that worked out well, sort of with my calendar of things I thought, and looked to apply then. And I think the process has changed since. I think it also changed before me, but when I applied, it was you get to rank your preferences of where you want to go, and then they uh, basically give you one option. They'll revert. First of all, you're accepted or not, and then if you're accepted, they'll revert to you with where they want to send you, and
Hmm.
you get like one chance to be like, can we can we go again? Can we try a different place? And they could end up coming back with the same place, or they could end up coming with a different place. And Peace Corps at the time, I think, was in over 60 countries, so
Okay.
quite a number of
So,
countries.
so
And
let
we
me
had
ask
to
you.
move with Mongolia.
Gotcha. So let me ask you before you continue on with the rest of that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
when you originally applied, what were your five locations you were really looking to go to? Like, was Ukraine at the top of the list?
I think it was three, and I
Okay.
think Ukraine was. Yes, I know Ukraine was at the top of the list, and I think the other two were also European, like Montenegro and Albania, something like
Okay.
that. It might have been North Macedonia. At the time, it was just Macedonia. Yeah, it was like some combination of that, but Ukraine was definitely the top.
Okay, nice. And so you fill out the application, you get accepted, you find out you're going to Ukraine. What was like the process between the time you got accepted and then when you got there? Was there what kind of training do you have to go to? How did they prep you for being ready to like live in Ukraine?
Yeah. Well, first, like I mentioned, they came back as to try to send. They wanted me to go to Mongolia, and I wasn't so gung ho on that.
Okay.
Mostly because what I know of Peace Corps Mongolia is like you're out there in this. I mean, Mongolia generally, like there's one city, and it's the least densely populated country in the world. So anyway, so I like went back to them and said like, no thanks, can we try again? And they came back with Ukraine. So Ukraine. Yeah. So that was, I guess, I applied November to probably found out in December, I would guess. And I didn't leave until August. There's a lengthy period where you don't really, as far as I remember, maybe I'm missing stuff, and this was 2017 to 18, so it was a little while ago. Not really anything, but to leave, you come. All the volunteers come. Actually, we came here to DC. Some go to like New York and other major airport locations before you fly out together. And we had like a 2 day pre. There's a term for it. I can't remember. Pre-departure conference here in DC. And then we all went out together. Our group. They call them groups, like class.
Hmm.
And then you have 3 months basically of it's called PST, pre-service training in country. And so we landed in Kiev, and pretty much like the first not really the first, but like uh, yeah, the first city to the west of Kiev was where our training town was. So they set you up, all volunteers in the same training town for those 3 months. You all basically learn how to be a teacher and learn how to be, because we were all English teacher, teaching English as a foreign language was our volunteer, was our service, and you learn the language. Those are like the two components, because the vast majority of us you don't have to be a teacher to be a Peace Corps teacher, and so the vast majority of us had never been teachers. So 3 months of a crash course on how to be a teacher and the language, and you live with a host family. And yeah, still in touch with my host family today. Got very lucky there. Love them to death, and visited several times since. But
So when I asked that, I know just knowing you, I know you had two host families. How did it go with your first one to your second one, and then like, can you stay with the host family if they want you for the continuation of your
Good question.
service,
Yeah.
or what prompted you to want to get your own place, and did they subsidize that for you, or how did that kind of work?
Good question. Lots of good questions. If I miss any, ask me again. Yeah, so after you're in that training town, you all get sent to your site, they call it. So it's a different town. Now, some people, I think, very few, stayed in that training town. And basically the vast majority of us knew we were leaving that training town at the end of 3 months, so leaving that host family, of course. And that was honestly really difficult, maybe the most difficult moment of my service, because up until that point, obviously huge culture shock, and no more than I really expected, but just the average amount of culture shock for a place as different.
Right.
And that family to me was Ukraine, right? Like that apartment, that family, all that. So it was a difficult transition period, I would say. But my second host family was amazing, in my permanent site town, and could not have done it without them either. And so you have to stay with that second host family for 3 months. You can extend all the way up to the duration of the time you're there, if they agree, of course, also. And I chose to say 6 in the end before I found my own place and moved out for then a year. So it's 27 months that you're there the whole time, but of course we got sent home March of 2020, obviously, and ended up staying in my own place only around a year, and the full length 3 months, and then the year is obviously like 21 months or 20, something like that.
Right. So I guess then that kind of leads me. So when you got your own place, like kind of what was that like? I mean, like I've worked in the real estate business and property management. Like there's a long application process. Like were they asking you to like, did the U.S., did the government, did the Peace Corps help you guys find a place? Did they like have it organized? Like how did that go?
That's really a good question, really interesting, because it's bringing back some memories that I haven't thought about, like parts of the whole looking for apartments process, which wasn't super smooth. That's part of the reason I stayed so long. I mean, I wanted to stay with my family longer than 3 months. I didn't feel like I had to get out right at the 3 months. I was perfectly happy there, but I did end up wanting my own place. It was actually, I think, the very first place I'd ever lived without a roommate. So I was really anxious, and obviously host families and such. So I was really anxious to kind of like get my own place, literally for the first time ever in my life. And so, yeah, there's not like background checks. There's not like signed leases. I don't think I signed it.
Is
Maybe I
there
did.
like, what do you say, like proof of funds? Like did you have to show you could pay the rent? Like how?
No, so that's a good question. No, the way it worked then anyway, and the currency is worth a lot less now, like almost twice as less. The numbers would be different, but at the time it was like 7,000, 8,000 in their currency, which is like $300 to $350 depending on the exchange rate. That's your stipend for the month. That's all you make, and that goes obviously a lot longer way than it does here, but it's still tight. And so I remember my rent being, I think, somewhere between 2 and 3,000. So getting close to like
A
40,
month?
40 2 to 3,000 of their currency, so $100 of the
Okay.
350.
Gotcha.
So not terrible percentages, but like a decent chunk. And you're not saving any of the rest or anything. So it's literally a stipend just to make sure that you get through the month to the next month, and that's your Peace Corps salary. Uh,
Gotcha.
yeah, and proof of funds or anything, no. But like, so obviously, I had some language skills, but I wasn't super fluent or anything. So what happens is you typically have like one counterpart, who is like your main sponsor, your main helper, who's a teacher at the school where you teach, and she or he, but in Ukraine almost always would be a she, like helps you around town, like especially obviously after I left my host family, again, got language skills, but like the particulars of a rental agreement, like not in my language skills, at least at that point, certainly. So like any time I went to visit an apartment, it was coordinating with her to find time that she was free to go. We were going together. I think it was like maybe my third or fourth apartment that I looked at, but like the first three were like, yeah, no, I don't want to live here. This one was like acceptable. And yeah, and like 1 month safety deposit, security deposit, I think. and paying cash. I paid in cash every month. The landlord literally came over and just sat down with me and counted the money and wrote in his notebook. Like everybody had a page in his notebook, like their
Yeah.
rent or whatever. Yeah, it's funny looking back on it. I haven't thought about that honestly.
That's kind of crazy. All right, well that's awesome. And so then you got your own place, but I want to go back a little bit. Like when you first got to Ukraine, you kind of talked about the culture shock. Tell me about what did you learn about the country and like the people and the culture? Like what were the biggest things that stood out?
Um, Everything centers around food or drink. There's no gathering, one funny thing, which I'm sure I've mentioned to you at some point, is like they don't really drink water. Not long into me being there, I'm like, how are you all still standing? Like, you don't really drink water.
Yeah.
The only water they get is like through coffee or tea, and also like if it's caffeinated, then it's like a dehydrant. So like, how are you alive? Like, I don't
Yeah.
understand. And it was pretty early on in like my dinners with my host family. Pretty much every night we were having dinner as a host family. The first host family in my training town, first days, weeks, and months, we were having like dinner together. And it was host mom, dad, and one host brother. They had one son. And I remember like maybe second, third meal, something like that, thinking like, are we gonna drink something? They don't drink when they eat. They drink like before and after.
Okay.
It's just a funny little thing, but just an example of like culture shock where I would ask like, can I have water? And they're like, oh, sure, yeah, I guess. Like if that's what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where was I going with that?
Well, I want to go off. You said everything centers around food and drink. I
Yeah.
remember a good point you said to me, and you kind of, maybe try to relate it to history a little bit. And you're like,
Oh
they
yeah,
always
we talked about
finish,
this.
they almost finish what they always finish everything they have to eat. And it was like you kind of made a reference to like when Ukrainian people maybe used to be starved or things like that. So it's like they for some reason might think that happened again. So they like eat what's there to get it down.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know about like always finish like what they cook because they always cook too much, but they certainly kind of like finish what's on their plate for sure.
okay. And
But
do you still stand by that kind of?
yeah, oh yeah, they like, and you can ask my brother this, and I'm sure you've talked about it with him when he came to visit me. Their goal is to like stuff you, like um, my host mom would just say to me in Ukrainian and Russian, just like eat, 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 like come on, eat, eat, and it's like I'm genuinely full, like I'm gonna burst, and so it's definitely a bit of like a historical psychological thing where. And I know we've talked about this before. There was a famine, like a forced famine by
Right.
Stalin. I think 1932 to 33. There's even a monument to it here in D.C., just down the street from the Capitol, which I didn't know until I moved here. Um, it's called Holodomor, and yeah, it's just kind of like always in their brain for sure. I mean, subconsciously, they're not
Right.
thinking about that consciously. I don't think, but they definitely. I don't know if they would eat. I don't know if they eat more overall. They're certainly not as like overweight as Americans are generally.
So it could have to do with what's in the food, maybe too.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. It's like all home cooked. Um,
Like, what were some of the big dishes? Like, what are the big things you'd eat like on a regular basis?
yeah, and they get it all from like the bazaar, right? Like it's home cooked, home like grown from a farm in their province. Yes, totally. Um, yeah, lots of cabbage. Not just like cabbage, but cabbage in lots of dishes. So there's actually something I grew up with my Polish grandma called they call it holtzy, and in Polish it's called like głąbki or something like that. Cabbage rolls, basically. That was one that I liked. Borscht, of course, everybody knows borscht.
Well, no. Well, what if people don't? What is it? What's borscht?
It's like it's beet soup, and I
Okay.
hate beets, but it's actually pretty good. It's okay. It's all right. Depends on actually the fixings. Like one thing they love to do generally is just throw sour cream on everything, and
Okay.
they do that with borscht. And and I had to be like, yeah, no, no sour cream, thanks. So there's definitely. I always like to say they in my opinion. First of all, the dishes are either a big home run or a big swing and a miss. There's a gross dish called holodets, which is it's like meat jelly, gelatin, basically. It's the texture, just the texture itself is not doable for me.
Yeah.
The fish they eat is it's not very good fish. It's like they're picking the bones out of their teeth, sort of thing. But the borscht is great. Holbcy is great. Vareniki, which is like pierogi, if you've ever had Polish pierogi, delicious. Pelmeni, which is like a smaller pierogi, basically the same thing. Deroni, which is like potato pancakes. Lots of potatoes all over the place. Yeah, really, really good dishes. And like pretty early on, my host mom got to know what dishes I liked and didn't, and she, like all Ukrainians, but especially my host mom, just like lived to cook for people generally, but me specifically. So.